What is the significance of this event which was held in Geneva today?
It is being sponsored by the Office of the High Commissioner. It has been co-sponsored by the International Commission of Jurists. It has been co-sponsored by the World Organization Against Torture, United Nations Voluntary Fund for Victims.
What is your perspective on the issue of enforced disappearances in Balochistan?
The people, particularly the civil society represented in this conference in Geneva, are mostly lobbied by the groups who have been involved in heinous crimes against the state. These militant groups have their civil society, their political mouthpieces based in Geneva, Baloch Achakzai Committee, BYC, Marang Baloch, who after every operation come on the street, allege these charges against the state. There are people on the move within the country. They travel across Pakistan, and they simply don't inform every police station that I'm going on holidays.
Also, those terrorists who have left their families and homes and gone abroad to join some terrorist organizations, they can also be considered as missing persons. Tell us, what is the reality of enforced disappearances in Indian-occupied Kashmir?
The issue of enforced disappearances in Kashmir is of a grave concern, and it more than 10,000 people who have been subjected to the arbitrary and all involuntary and enforced disappearance in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. More than 7,000 unmarked mass graves. These were the graves where the people who were taken into custody, they were killed.
Viewers, very warm welcome to another episode of V News English program Perspectives, in which we bring before you perspectives from the leading experts on some of the most critical international issues that the world faces today. Today, an extraordinary event was held in one of the world's leading hubs of multilateral diplomacy, Geneva, on the sidelines of the United Nations, called International Conference on Enforced Disappearances. In order to understand the significance of this issue of enforced disappearances, its perception and reality, today I am joined by two of the leading authorities on the issue of enforced disappearances from human rights perspective, and also from an international and regional security perspective. From the human rights perspective, I'm joined by one of the leading human rights activists and heading a think tank on Kashmir, Kashmir International Institute of International Relations, Mr. Altaf Hussain Wani, who's a famous and frequent speaker at UN Geneva, whereas I'm also honored to welcome Mr. Achakzai, who's a leading security expert, a former minister in Balochistan's government, and an expert on Balochistan affairs. So I'll be discussing with them the issue of enforced disappearances, both at the global, regional, and domestic levels. So let me first begin by asking Mr. Altaf Wani, what is the significance of this event which was held in Geneva today? People from which countries participated, and which regions and countries were discussed today at the conference on enforced disappearances, Altaf Saab?
Thank you, Mohammed Ali Sir, for having me. Actually, this event started today, the first World Congress on Enforced Disappearances. It started today, it will continue tomorrow also. We had an official opening ceremony at 1 p.m. Pakistan Standard Time, which was at 9 at the Geneva time, and it's continuing to get. I was when I joined you, I was online in the fight against impunity, ensuring international accountability for perpetrators or enforced disappearances. Because at the same time, there were three panelists are being held at a time. And this conference is being sponsored by the Working Group on Enforced Disappearances. It is being sponsored by the Office of the High Commissioner. It has been co-sponsored by the International Commission of Jurists. It has been co-sponsored by the World Organization Against Torture, United Nations Voluntary Fund for Victims, and the International Center for Transitional Justice. And similarly, we could see there the a Federation of Human Rights Leagues, and we have the International Center, Chatlan Institute of Peace, and these were the co-sponsoring agencies of this event. And as far as all the top international institutions responsible for the human rights, for the accountability of the human rights, from the ICJ, from the International Criminal Court to the Human Rights Commissioner's Office, and different international NGOs, their heads are taking part in it. It was inaugurated, this session, particularly the strengthening the accountability. This session was inaugurated by the what we say the deputy prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Ms. Sharmeen Khan, who is the Deputy Prosecutor General this time. She inaugurated it, and then we had a lot of expertise, at least eight of the expertise there. But in the opening session, along with the panelists, we had some of the victims from Nepal, South American states, especially where from the Argentina, Guatemala, and other places where these Chile and other places, those gave their brief introductions were there, how their families have been made, have disappeared, and what were their struggles for. And we were fortunate enough in the preliminary section, there was a reference to the Kashmir made by the International Federation for Human Rights League. Its president made a very glaring when he was discussing about the situation around the globe. He made a reference to the Kashmir, that the situations like Kashmir and other places like Syria, and Gambia and other places where these human rights abuses have been happening, and the enforced disciplines are like epidemic. They basically, this Congress is of its first time it was held. So they were discussing, and discussion is on how to create an accountability mechanism. Though we have that Rome's attitude says that these people should be made accountable. There is also the Convention Against Enforced Disappearances. Enforced disappearance is treated as crimes against humanity. But till date, we have seen there is no local, because wherever these crimes are done, wherever these enforced disciplines are done, the governments of those and or the perpetrators, they are almost powerful people, and they hide all those things which are to be needed for a persecution, to persecute any of the perpetrators. But at the same time, the international mechanisms have been set there, but till date we could see that only they could provide some sort of assistance to the victims, but there has been no reparation to the victims of the enforced disappearances around the globe. So this conference is there to create such environment, such a mechanism, such an engagement among the different stakeholders, among the different entities of the United Nations and also the civil society to foster their as a mechanism so that those who responsible for these crimes against humanity are made responsible or made accountable. So this has a very huge value for the victims of the enforced disappearances, and the human rights fraternity around the globe is looking towards this event very eagerly, and they are participating in it, and they see that they could devise a mechanism by which an international mechanism so that the perpetrators are held responsible. We know that besides the Convention on Enforced Disappearances, till date, only 77 countries have signed and ratified the Convention on Enforced Disappearances. So the process is so slow that states are not ready even to ratify it, even to sign it. So this all is happening over there. Let us see what happens, because it will continue till 10 Pakistan Standard Time today, and tomorrow at 9 it will start again and will continue.
Thank you, Altaf Saab. But let me ask you for a brief response that based on what you heard and you also participated it online, tell me what is your sense from what I have gathered based on what you just said. It seems that enforced disappearances is a global issue. And you mentioned a lot of countries from Asia, Middle East, Latin America, where this issue draws and attracts attention. But tell me, is this an issue which primarily affects the global south, or do you think some major powers, because we have authentic reports and information that enforced disappearances and missing persons is an issue that affects global north equally. And we hear that some people, a significant number of them, are missing in Britain, in the US, in India, in other countries as well. So, based on what you heard today, do you think it is only the issue which is being discussed in the context of global south, or do you think UN is independent enough to discuss this issue in the context of global north as well?
As far as the discussion which is going on and which is taking place in Geneva at this point of time, and what I heard and what I listened to the different experts during the past 6 hours at least, I could see that it was discussed at length. It's not only the global south, it is the global north also. They discussed each and every one, because the people who are discussing these things, who are trying to create a certain kind of mechanism for it, they have their own credibility for this. They have worked for the human rights over the years. And so they are discussing all the situations. They don't discuss only the global south. They discuss it thoroughly. That it is sad that it is happening all over the globe, and in certain countries like Kashmir, where over 10,000 people have disappeared, and in general, when we say globally, over 100,000 people are enforcedly disappeared. So this is not me saying, this was what the working group on enforced disappearances say, committee on enforced disappearances say that it's a global phenomenon. It's not specific to any countries. We have seen it happening in United States. We have seen it happening in Canada. We have seen it happening in Britain. We have seen happening in the different European countries, and not to talk of the India and the other countries where it is like an epidemic.
Thank you, Altaf Saab. Now let me draw the contribution of Mr. Jan Achakzai. Um, we hear a lot of attention being given in some Western media, non-governmental organizations, and sections of press that it is also an issue which affects Balochistan. There have been repeated statements from the government, from state institutions, which have presented an alternative picture of the situation. You are an expert on Balochistan affairs. You've served in the cabinet of the Balochistan government as well. I want to know what is your perspective on the issue of enforced disappearances in Balochistan. Uh, there are allegations that state institutions and military and intelligence organizations are involved in this issue, whereas government has attempted to dispel these allegations. What is your take on this?
Thank you very much. I'm privileged to be here on this platform discussing a very important issue. There is a problem in terms of narrative and perception. People seldom try to ascertain the facts and the ground situation. This is why, the people, particularly the civil society represented in this conference in Geneva, are mostly lobbied by the groups who have been involved in heinous crimes against the state, who have been attacking the state law enforcement institutions, who have been involved in the killing of ordinary people in Balochistan over the last few years. These militant groups have their civil society, their political mouthpieces based in Geneva. One group I would particularly mention, BLF, which is a militant organization, a terrorist group operating out of our neighboring country, has a political representation called BNM. They are lobbying the international community against Pakistan. Another group which again represent another terrorist group called BLA is represented by another mouthpiece called Balochistan Committee, BYC, Marang Baloch, who after every operation come on the street, allege these charges against the state, block roads, and forget the bigger picture. Now, what is the bigger picture? Since Balochistan has been infested with terrorism, with major problem of terrorism in the recent past, where we have sanctuaries in our neighborhood from where suicide bombers, terrorist incidents have been operationalized and launched, where our security forces have been attacked, where ordinary people have been targeted by checking their identity. This problem of terrorism has been in Balochistan, which is a reality of the situation. Now, how we deal with that? The people who, flout this narrative of disappearances are enforced, disappearances are missing person, they simply ignore three basic categories of the narrative. The first reality is the people who are attacking the state of Pakistan have been removed from their families by themselves, by the networks who use them as a pawn, as foot soldiers against the state of Pakistan. They have loved ones, and when they disappear, simply their families and loved ones come on the street, block the roads and in the city and across Balochistan, and blame the state for the whereabouts which are not known to anybody. The second category is of the people of the what I call it migrants. There are people who go to Europe as economic migrant or Middle East. They use Balochistan, and also some of the people from Balochistan when unfortunately incidents like far off in the Greece water when their boat capsized and people belonging to different areas of Pakistan and Balochistan are killed. They, we find out that the youth who have been in these waters, who have been killed, through these rough shores and waters, were actually removed themselves without providing any data to the state authorities. So that category also comes into this, what they call it, forced in disappearances. The third most important thing is there are people on the move within the country. They travel across Pakistan, and they simply don't, inform every police station that I'm going on holidays, for example. for example, in the north of Pakistan or in the southeast of Pakistan. So that also ends up in the narrative of these political activists come terrorist facilitators based in Balochistan or in Islamabad or in Geneva for that matter, and they fiddle this narrative against the state of Pakistan. This is the harsh reality, which the legit international human rights community ignore when they discuss the missing person issue in the context of Balochistan. Balochistan is not Indian-occupied Kashmir or Delhi or Uttar Pradesh or Bengal, where the number of disappearances, number of people who disappeared forcefully runs in hundreds of thousands. I can give different statistics of Europe, the UK, and America, but the actual figure of Pakistan, where the data we are talking about is has been. We had a commission that was an inquiry commission which inquired the whole cases. They let the loved one and the families of alleged disappeared people to come with the evidence, and the whole numbers they came up with were 10,000 people around. That is the figure of the inquiry commission. But after detailed investigation by the authorities, we found out that 8,000 people were traced. Their origin was we were traced, and we know that only we were left with around 2,000 figure. Out of those 2,000 figure, 1,100 or something were economic migrant, or they joined these terrorist groups, or they were persuaded simply to go to these training camps in the neighboring countries, i.e. Afghanistan and Iran for that matter, which have borders with Balochistan, and few hundred figures we ended up. This is why it's more than just a missing person issue. It's the connotation is more political than the data we are talking about. So whoever these people are, whether they are based in Geneva or other political groups or what they call it civil society, they basically want to put the state in corner by using the word missing person, where they never condemn the terrorist groups attacking the state of Pakistan. They receive their corpses, they block road for them, they call their terrorist attacks as resistance against the state. They condone their terrorism, and they never condemn the killing of the law enforcement, police, FC, and other armed services of Pakistan who protect under the constitution the people of Pakistan and who are responsible for the peace of this region. This is why we have a disagreement with the community at large, particularly based in Geneva. They don't visit Balochistan, they don't visit Pakistan, and they just are lobbied, sensitized by the mouthpiece of terrorist groups operating in Balochistan.
I think that's a very extensive and comprehensive analysis of the situation in Balochistan, Mr. Achakzai. But I'd like to know, what do you say about the allegations that the state institutions are involved in missing persons case or enforced disappearances? Is there some truth to these allegations?
Okay, I'm not saying that there might not be a incident somewhere where a person have been picked up by a security agency or police or whoever the investigating to authority may be. But make no mistake, we are facing a serious threat of terrorism. It's tactical threat. Our young men are dying every day, and it is the task of our intelligence agencies, our security institutions, to trace the networks who operate behind these terrorist incidents. When a terrorist, a group of terrorists comprising 5 to 10 members attack a state installation, a city installation, a person or a police vane or security vane, they just don't come out of the blue. They must have been trained for the last 6 months. They must have a sanctuary. They must have a mastermind. They must have resources. And make no mistake, they have American weapons and they have night goggles. So it has to come from somewhere. It has to have a supply chain. Now, to trace the supply chain, it is the job of these security, law enforcement security, to find out the real intel. And they have to investigate people. When your city, when in the city, people have sympathizers, they have a facilitators, they have a night stay, they have a transportation system. They are now operate, through normal cars and using the normal vehicles. So they must have a network of facilitators. So it's the state responsibility to unearth them. So I am saying that, are they being killed just by picking up? No, obviously they are produced in the court of law if there is any suspicion, if they are involved in serious heinous crimes. Then this is also within the constitution, that any facilitation to terrorist act will not be tolerated. I mean, I can give you hundreds of examples of the developed world. I mean, would any terrorist's relative or facilitator who is involved or complicit in staging an incident in the street of London or New York can get away with? No, of course not. The full might of the state will come against them, and they will be punished in no time.
I think that you made some very compelling arguments, Mr. Achakzai. So what I understand from your arguments is that not only those individuals who left their family for some reasons and have been sort of victims of illegal human smuggling are also can be considered as missing persons, but also those terrorists who have left their families and homes and gone abroad to join some terrorist organizations. They can also be considered as missing persons. And lastly, those people who have been victims of these terrorist attacks, which also range into thousands, are discovered only once they have been identified, could also be considered as missing persons. So let me bring this question to Mr. Wani. How does this international event focusing on enforced disappearances distinguish between these different types of disappearances, whether if they are willing individuals who have been part of the international immigration, or they have been trying to seek greener pastures in other land, or trying to flee from conflict zones. I'm sure Afghanistan saw millions of Afghans migrating to Pakistan, to Iran, to Germany, to European Union. From a UN perspective, would you consider these people as missing persons if they are not registered in Pakistan lawfully? And secondly, how does the UN system distinguish between these different types of people who are missing, who are willingly missing, who are missing by virtue of being part of a criminal human trafficking a movement, or they are part of some insurgent or terrorist outfit?
You see, when we talk of UN system or when we talk of the civil society, so these are two different things. UN systems view the missing person after a very thorough investigation into the things. They receive the allegations, and then they send those allegations to the respective governments, and then they receive the answers from the respective governments about that, what has happened, what has not. And only after a thorough investigation, then they say somebody is missing or not. When we talk, if we talk, take the case of Balochistan. For this purpose, Pakistan made a very brave decision way back when they invited the Working Group on Enforced Disappearances to Pakistan. Until then, the international organizations, be that NGOs and Baloch activists, they were making a very hue and cry on these things and alleging the government of Pakistan for these things. But after the visit of the Working Group on Enforced Disappearances and after the Supreme Court of Pakistan established it, as John Saw was telling us about the commission on these missing persons, then we saw a different shift in the international narrative on the United Nations systems. You could see that that narrative of Baloch is missing. Yes, outside that, the Balochs, as John Saab was telling us, different people who are outside, who are working on the payroll of different agencies to destabilize Pakistan, to create some hurdles for Pakistan, to create a bad name for Pakistan's political structure or for their human rights record. They allege Pakistan. But as far as the UN system is concerned, I will tell you, the UN system has they make a thorough investigation on each and everything, whatever evidence is available to them. Only but they write to the government. They don't make any allegation out of for that. That is the system there. What we say off and on in Pakistani media here in local in Pakistan do create such a havoc out of it, or some of the individuals do take a havoc of it. You can't see in any of the UN working groups report or in allegation letters to the government of Pakistan like this, because they think on it. Ah, yes, there are people, as John Sab was telling us, who are working as the bones of the different agencies at different places around the globe, and they have their own agenda. They are doing that, so we can't do about that. If they are whatever they are doing, their activities have also been curbed by the international. Even these Balochs, of whom John Sab was telling us, they are not even allowed to enter the United Nations building. Most of them are not allowed to even enter to the building. But now they have introduced new things like Marang Baloch and others, and newer people are coming in, and they are getting entries. But when their actuality, when their the international audience looks at it through that lens, that are these people planted or these people are real victims, then they decide on the merits.
Okay, Vanisa, but let me ask you, since you come from Kashmir and you have worked on Kashmir as an activist, as a international expert, and you've spoken about it at the UN frequently. Tell us, what is the reality of enforced disappearances in Indian-occupied Kashmir? And do you think enough and adequate international concern and attention is given to that issue?
But the issue of enforced disappearances in Kashmir is of a grave concern, and it has been of a grave concern even to the UN entity that, like the Working Group on Enforced Disappearances, Committee on Enforced Disappearances. They often on write to the government of India on these issues, and also the EU Parliament had it's a Human Rights Committee advises government of India. They recommend the government of India to have the forensic evidence of all those who are buried in unmarked mass graves in different places in the Jammu and Kashmir. Today, even when we are talking, there is no Kashmiri present in that, but there are international organizations and people of repute who are talking about the enforced disappearances of the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, because they have actually those things have been found. The International Tribunal for Peace and Justice, they found around 7,000 unmarked mass graves at different places throughout the length and breadth of Jammu and Kashmir, and that's why the European Parliament's subcommittee on human rights came into action. They asked the government of India that we will provide you the financial assistance as well as technical assistance to have a forensic of these remains, so that we could come know about these people, because only one grave was identified in Kashmir. Indian government, alleged international agencies, or any organization of the international organizations to visit Kashmir to take. Even the State Human Rights Commission, which used to be there in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, they they tried to investigate it. They established a commission, and when its report came, that commission was also disbanded by the government because the government did not took its recommendations. That is why you can see the National Human Rights Commission of India has been dropped. They don't have now the accreditation of the international human rights institutions because the way they are dealing with the situation in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir and other parts of India, especially the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, where it has been proved that the people who were arrested by the forces from their homes in daylight, they never returned. They were dubbed, and then the government took different routes, but they could not prove that. That's why that international community, time and again, they're in reports of the working group and others. But at the end of the day, you see the international human rights system, it doesn't have their own teeth. They derive the teeth from the political governments, from the Human Rights Council or the Human Rights Council or the UN Security Council. But there also we can see what the big power game and the different polarization around the globe, and then the human rights is mere thing used for certain weak countries. When it comes to the big economies, they don't care about human rights. They care about just for their economic benefits. They care about their profit, and for that they can sacrifice any of the human rights systems. And that's what is happening in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. That is why the India is not being made accountable by the international political powers. I'll say time and again, when it comes to the human rights machinery, they have time and again asked the government of India. They have time and again recommended to the government of India. They have time and again condemned the acts of the government of India. They have time and again raised the questions of those draconian laws which the government of India has enacted in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, those draconian laws which give powers to their security forces, to their to do anything they can and treat it in the line of duty, and they are not made accountable. They are not being persecuted in any court of law. They cannot be persecuted in any court of law. That is where the impunity, where the first of the agenda which today came into in was the ensuring the accountability, because impunity is all over the globe for these actors who perpetrate these enforced disciplines and other crimes. But it was the first session was for accountability, and where I told you that it was the only region in the southeast was the Kashmir, which was mentioned there by the world's famous human rights advocates, that there have been thousands of imposed disappearances in Kashmir, and which the victims still wait for their loved ones, and the government of India and its agencies they do not allow any investigation, and the victims are still waiting for their loved ones. And one of the major issues is that of the half wives and half widows of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, which you can see it is in each of the Western universities research that half wives, half widows of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, how they face their lives because of their loved ones are not declared dead. We don't know their, so they cannot marry, and they have to bear the brunt of their families. They have to become the breadwinners of their families and have to face all other problems which are associated with this stigma, associated with this, they face it there. But I'll tell you again, the international community, when it comes to human rights organizations, I'm always thankful to them, because against the such surveillance which the Indian government has put, and all those human rights defenders who could document these things, who could produce the reports from Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. They are behind the bars, like Puram Parvez, one of the leading experts in the human rights world and well respected throughout the globe, is now facing the terrorism charges from the government of India under UAPA. But international human rights machinery has time and again talked about him, and in each and every report, each and every human rights special rapporteur is asking government of India for his release. But unfortunately, as I told you, the human rights systems don't have the teeth to bite India.
Tasab, just give me lastly a few numbers so that our international viewers can better understand the situation and the gravity of this issue in Indian occupied Kashmir. In your assessment and as per the UN assessment, how many Kashmiris are victims of enforced disappearances?
You see, Rishabh, in early 90s, this was an epidemic in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And the estimated figures from the Jammu Kashmir Coalition of Civil Society, from the Association of Parents of Enforced Disappeared Persons, and International Tribunal for Peace and Justice, it's more than 10,000 people who have been subjected to the arbitrary and all involuntary and enforced disappearance in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Whereas we have seen this International Tribunal for Peace and Justice, and also this Jammu Kashmir Coalition of Civil Society, when they investigated, when they saw certain places in the northern district of Baramulla, and then also in the Punch and other places, where they found more than 7,000 unmarked mass graves. These were the graves where the people who were taken into custody, they were killed during the interrogations and then dumped in those graves. And then the government of India took refuge that they have gone to across for the arms training and whatever they could accuse them.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today to discuss a very important issue. And there are three takeaways that I can share after this very extensive discussion on the issue of enforced disappearances. Number one, this is a global issue, and it deserves global attention and global concern. Secondly, the issue needs adequate and proportionate concern and interest, considering the gravity of this issue in different parts of the world. And as Mr. Wani pointed out, there are more than 10,000 evidences of enforced disappearances, including over 7,000 graves of missing people which have been discovered in Indian occupied Kashmir. Whereas Mr. Jan Achakzai dispelled the allegations and concerns regarding Balochistan by giving compelling arguments that most people who are considered missing in Balochistan are either victims of terrorism or have been participating in terrorism by going to other countries, leaving their homes and families, or have been victims of the international human trafficking. So these factors and realities must be considered and in an unbiased manner appreciated in order to better understand the global reality of missing persons and enforced disappearances. Thank you so much for joining us today.